Good morning, my dear friends. Those of you who tuning in this Sunday morning, happy Sunday. For those who go into church, I just want to pray God and ask God uh, grace upon you as you, especially the Librarians and my friends that will listen to this video. I come by this morning to ask for a general prayers for my native Liberia. And we just want to thank God that we got a station called Spoon TV or Spoon Talk that is revealing all of the impasses of the kind of stories that are going on in our country. And as we listen every day, there is nothing in sight of having even a government running or even seeing peace in sight, seeing the issue of rehabilitation in sight, seeing restructuring of Liberia in sight, because every country survives on money or financial resources. And God never failed Liberians. He knew where the people who came to uh, establish Liberia, God knew their condition. That was, we describe it as their condition. Many decades of various generations of slaves in America. And we're up to the generation that when the slave trade ended in 1600 with the two Abraham Lincoln, factory drivers and others who negotiated behind the scene to free the slaves. And when they free them, they have an option to return back to Africa. And the returning of the slave to Africa also have its own political implication, political, social implication. So there were some people who wanted, since they have developed missionary to do the work where the slave were doing, it was okay. Some wanted the black out of there. But then because of economic factor, uh, that the United States were benefiting from slaves. Even after the slave trade, there were people still doing slave trade on the hand, and in America, and they wearing all that okay with the end of slave trade. So they said, okay, we'll send them back home. But then in the middle of repatriation to Africa, there's political, economic factor kick in right in between where they put a halt to the repatriation. And because these very large corporations were still relying on the strength of the slave to refurbish their very huge corporations that were dealing with slaves, and they needed the black at the time. Because as you know, the black was not only used for farming, but they were also used for the very war that America fought, for independence. The black played a pivotal role. And then after the War of Independence, they had an internal war too that was between the North and the South of America. And based on my historical finding on the what they call the biography of Abraham Lincoln written by one Rudolph, and I listened to that biography of Abraham Lincoln, and we saw how the war between the Confederate and the Union, the Confederate were kind of winning because they put the black people on the front line. They were facing the bullet, and the other white people was in the back, and because of that, decided to win. And the Union was controlled by the Republican, and the Confederate was to the other side. of the political political establishment in America at the time. So, because of Abraham Lincoln's friendship with Frederick Douglass, his war room, they met in the war room. When you hear me talking about war room all the time, that's what a serious country, a serious president in a serious country, they will always bring advisors around them to help them make decisions for the country, especially when it comes to a very sticking decision, and if they see the country at stake. So people suggested, look, they met. If in order to win this war, we got to begin to recruit black on the side of the Union. So they met, and Abraham Lincoln, the general, they met in the war room and discussed it. So he gave the go-ahead for them to begin to recruit black of the Union, which then like the Republican Party group at the time. And then when they begin to recruit black, they begin to realize that they'll begin to they start to win the war against, the Confederate group. Right there and then, Abraham Lincoln began to see the other side of the slave. Then he said, oh, okay. And then they begin to recruit. That's how come now they gather the strength and begin to win the Confederate side. And it was predicated upon that moved Abraham Lincoln to lay his life down for the black people to be free. And then, because of that, those who agreed now to come to Africa, they begin to repatriate them. But in the middle, like I said, it was interfered with because people were not comfortable. If we allow all of them to go back to Africa, who will continue to work? Because some of them was because the black people was the cheapest labor they had against their own will, the will of the black people. So the corporation preferred to use black people, not paying them, but either abuse them and use them to make money. So that's how come the group that came Liberian when they're lucky to reach, and then that the whole politics got into it, the whole repatriation, bloop, it came to an end. Why am I bringing the history in? In the midst of all of that, these people make the sacrifice to come back home. And then all of them will able to got a nation called Liberia. And any child who decide to disrespect your parent, insult them, some of them beat their parent, it's a big curse on you. So when they came, like I always said, they met up with war and resistance, and they had to maneuver their way to stay because they couldn't get back in the ship to go back. And I bring this thing to reflect our mind for us to go back to where the problem of Liberia coming from in order to be able to solve it. Because it happened for decades and decades and decades, and people ride on it. Right up to Tottenham. Joseph Jenkins Roberts, his duty was to form this American colony and allow it to work. And he did his part. And then from there, other presidents started to take over. But I would like to jump all of them and come right on to E.J. Raw and then right on to Tottenham. And when Tottenham took over, Tottenham was the, what they call it, the transitional president. The president of the people, the indigenous people. Because Tottenham was trying to look at the two-party government running a one-party state and focusing on members of that, what they call it, members of that, what they call it, supremacy group. So the Tory party became a supremacy government that held its gripped on the country administration, because of all of the parents and other provinces that were coming out. They decided to hold on to that. And then Totman became the people he connected to, the indigenous people. That's where his power came from. And he spent many years, and he had to struggle. Totman had to struggle with the Tory party government to be able to integrate the entire country, the indigenous and American-Liberians. It was a tough thing for Totman to do, because he came, the two major permanent policy that Totman came up with today, that integrated the American-Liberian and the indigenous people. The integration policy, in order to integrate the indigenous and the American-Liberian together, to work together, and the unification policy. So after integrating them, Totman came up with the unification. And mind you, he had Amanda Torber as his vice president, who was the academia and the brain trust. So it was easier for them to sit down and talk, to work together, to be able to implement the two policies. A integration policy first, integrate the American-Liberian and indigenous, and then to unify them. So that's why Totman came with the two major policy of his government, the integration policy and the unification policy, that begin to see black. And if you go back to history, you see that more indigenous boys who came at that time, they became permanent within the Totman administration on up to the time Torber took over. And then Torber's plan was that since these people who kept them far away all these years and bringing them, then we have to, the educational system was only among the American-Liberian. At the time, the indigenous was only up to domestic 7, and they determine how far you go in school at the time, because the fear was there. When conflict bring about fear, especially one who have more power than the other. It creates fear. And then now you have power over these people, you're integrating them. The fear was still there. Suppose they are more than us, they are in numbers. It will allow them to go so far, they made revenge against us. And that's things were creeping slowly, like eating cancer in Liberia. So that had Torber came in the gap to try to introduce educational system to the indigenous people, because they were in the majority, and you cannot have a nation with the majority of the people being illiterate, and then you expect for the country to develop. So he invested heavily in the educational program of Liberia to make sure that indigenous children. So he went from primary education right up to high school and university. But he was able to decide to build a strong foundation of the education from elementary and primary education right up to high school, with the hope that if the indigenous children reach up to high school, they're able to be job ready in many areas. So he introduced multilateral education in order the high school. So by the time for junior high school, getting high school, you're prepared. When you finish, all of those trade were all in order the very high school in Liberia during the Torber administration, so that by the time you graduate, you're able to work and then get yourself ready to go to university to prepare. And that was a beautiful educational recovery program that Torber started, that our so-called indigenous people and the indigenous children who became now politicians have some education. People go to school, they don't learn proper, they learn the one used to destroy themselves. That will happen to Liberia today. And if that is not true, what up to when 1980 came, when Doe began to learn, when he went to school, began to learn, he went beyond. He had some good people at that time. We have most of the guys in the American-Liberian, Doe began to bring them in his government, and he had some of them as his tutor. And then he began to see, then he began to focus on the educational aspect of it and incorporate indigenous people. And then at that time, people started to undermine his government by going in his ears and misinfluencing Samuel Doe. It happened gradually until the idea of demonstration, University of Liberia Student Union, the two major links to and what they call Unification Party on LU, whatever it is. And they started all the political movement with backup Matthew then trying to overthrow the Toba government using the indigenous children. That's what they did. So by the time Toba was overthrown, the army took over and put a clause over the country. All of these political parties, all of them wear army uniform because Doe had to bring them in to help him, run the government. And when they got to the point where they realized that Doe has solidified himself as president and then begin to hold on to power, then they decided to start putting a group against Doe to remove him, instead of through the bars, it couldn't work. He came as a military man. That's where the problem started coming from. That was our problem became sticky. So, and within the process, right up to the middle of the 1980s, going to the 90s, the educational system, University of Liberia, all of them had already begun poising. It was already broken down. The structure was no longer gone. Conflicts were coming. Most of the foreign teachers and things that Towa brought in, most of them who started to leave the country because he brought people from Sierra Leone, Ghana, Nigeria, all over Africa, to bring teachers and professors for the university and the very high school. So they started going because they saw that the war was coming. Some of them started leaving because some of them had already built themselves back home and built homes and everything, so they were easy for them to leave. They started to leave. So the splinter group that stayed behind, they bought a wreck with 1990 war, and that was some of the issue. I decided to avoid that in my book because all those things would have been part of it, because we saw how the rebel group was running up foreigners, and those who, especially when Nigeria and Ghana came in, they became some kind of enemy to the MPFL, which had the largest group of rebels. So most of them lost their life, and Taylor managed to save some of them, and most of them lose their lives. Those who were able to escape, they escaped. Some of them had discarded themselves. I saw all of that, but I didn't put in my book. But part 2 of that book in the nearby future will come out with the rest of the story, that I saw. And because when I started publishing this book, when I started publishing my book, it was a big volume, but I realized I didn't take into consideration the intensity of the financial obligation to that. So I had to cut this book down, to this size, giving life a meaning, because God allowed me to live all these years in Liberia, and so when Liberia was okay, when we have good educational system, and I was around until everything started breaking down, right down to 1990, the war. So that's how I took the decision. I said, well, from what I'm seeing, because I went through, by the time I hit Finder campus, I started seeing the real stuff. Because before that time, the rebel giving people money and doing this, all kind of strategy they use to influence people. And then by the time you cross, you get to that side, no retreat, no surrender. You're there. You're inside. You're already in it. So we are in it. And for me, I left my resident on 12th Street with the word of God, the 23rd Psalm. I said, God, I'm leaving to go out of Monrovia, because MPFL putting a lot of pressure on removing Doe. There was mortar, there was rockets falling, because most of them passed over my house in 12th Street, where I got SD Cobra Clinic, and went straight to the ocean. So that's how I left, with relying on the 23rd Psalm of David. And every checkpoint, as I approached every checkpoint, I recited As I sat down, and when fear was coming, I will recite it. So that's what I did, you know, uh, to be able to come up with this edition of this book, Giving Life a Meaning. There's nothing more than giving life a meaning when you have the means. If you don't have the money, you can use a verse to give people life a meaning by telling the story of Liberia. And then when I did my online ministry, it was all about my community in Canada, and 25% Canada and 75% Liberia. You know, that's how I started talking about all of the political, because I'm already familiar with some of those issues that cause us to reach to where we are as a nation. From high school, I was growing up from elementary school, teachers start looking at me, and one of my elementary school teacher that he was one of my favorite. I used to, you know, I happy when I come to school, was the Dr. Sam Bear, who served as the educational board head in Rhode Island. Dr. Sam Bear taught me in third grade, fourth grade, up to fifth grade, before I crossed over to the high school. 1979, I passed the seventh grade and went to the high school. And our high school, the Frank E. Tolbert High School, was a multilateral high school. They had all the trade there. Like I said before, most of the boys that who were in the business department, right after graduation, they had job with Vera Banks. Hudson Bank at the time was one of the major banks. Most of them had job because they did accounting under the late legendary Benjamin Jordan, who was the head of the what they call it, the what they call it, the accounting department of Benson of Frank E. Tolbert High School. You know, and then at the same time he was teaching us biology. So we started from seventh grade. I started to do modern biology from seventh grade all the way up to high school, 12th grade until I graduated from seventh grade. So that how the standard of Benson Frank E. Tolbert High School was, you know, because sometimes when he read our tests, when Benjamin Jordan read our test, you hear the whole woo, because it was sound like university lesson, and for seventh graders, and the seventh grade, eighth grade, and we went up. And some of us love education at the time. Our parents influenced us a lot. So that's it. So we reached to that point where how the country was funded, how the disintegration started through these so-called politicians who was nurtured to to remove the Tubman administration, and then that same group regrouped themselves. That's what you call regrouping. They regrouped themselves to come to remove Tower administration. And again, when Tower left on that, they were in the system, they regrouped again for the third time to remove Doe. And then the removal of Doe, was the American government, ended into the 15 years war. And here we are today. So what do you think happened to the educational system? And all those time up to 1990, when the war started, Liberia was at 90% illiteracy rating. 90% illiterate. So it would mean that the people who are literate was the 10% of a population of the country. Up to 1990, after 1990, it's just school for survival, for academic survival, school for academic survival. That's how I describe it. So which means before the war, you have the teachers and things that are getting old. They are getting old already. Some of them who was, from different countries, Ghana and other places, all of them, some of them who survived and went back home. Then we have these people who are graduating from anywhere, from University of Liberia. At the time, there was still a little bit of standard there. And then the various schools, and because we have Tower established two institutions, teacher training institutions, very top-notch teacher training institution. People usually come from other part of Africa to come to the teacher training institution. And those teachers from those various institutions, from the teacher training, are the one that we sat under their voice, including Dr. Sam Bear, who was the educator. I think he's still working with the educational board. He was the head of the educational board, of Rhode Island. And I'm proud that I sat under his voice in third, fourth, and fifth grade. And now he went to that level. So you can see the people that influence some of us academically. Dr. Bellman, number one instructor. Because he's a love when he used to lecture. He will make sure that he will teach us in a way that we understand as children. So I used to love him. I used to be happy when I see him coming. The other guy, teacher Vanny, he used to come with King. He used to flunk the hell when he miss anything, he flunk it for you. So Mr. Barely had time to beat next to here, but he was very brilliant guy. So he used his brilliance to help us academically. So, so that's it. That's where we are right now. The water drive, fish eat fish. That's the situation in Liberia right now. The fish is not eating fish. So it's a very sorrowful problem. And we are after the war now. All the administration came, they failed on everything for Ellen Johnson. She had to fail. She failed on everything, on rehabilitation, everything. And then was a guardian George Wareham who didn't know what to do. You're not president. He did rely on his friends and who misled him to accumulate financial accusation. And then we are. But Bwaga came and stepped right in there. And then you find mischief librarians surrounded him in whatever way they did. And they decided to bring in money doubler into the government of Bwaga administration. Money doublers. Because so many guys are in exile what they are doing. And they were in exile doing it. Then they go in the government that the money, the millions of dollars in United States dollar right into their hands. So now the old man who coming from a normal day person, he thinking normal day. Liberia is not a normal country. Never ever is not a normal country. They will never be until it can be. So that was Omen Bwaga writing the thing that told you about the day where you can still have auto power, and they say nobody dare to challenge all that kind of thing. That's not that day again. So it's finished. It's over. So I start by this morning to give the reflection on this Sunday morning for Liberia. This is where we are. So for those of who know how to pray, when you pray in your closet, pray for Liberia. So I want to thank you. I pray in the name of the Father, Son, and the blessed Holy Spirit. I pray with thanksgiving. Amen. God bless.